Imagine standing in a grassy field on the windswept coast of southwest Britain, bending down to pick up a worn fragment of clay that once formed part of someone's household centuries ago. That shard, seemingly unremarkable, might actually carry a fascinating story about how people in the far western stretches of Roman-era Britain lived, traded, and coped with the transformations of the 5th century. Are you curious how a simple cooking pot could illuminate such an ancient tale? Read on and discover an intriguing journey of pottery traditions, economic shifts, and cultural resilience as the once thriving Roman administration came to an end in Devon and northeastern Cornwall. Did you know that, in many parts of Britain, the use and production of Roman-style pottery appear to have dwindled abruptly once the imperial authority faded? Yet in Cornwall, certain wares, particularly those made with a distinctive Gabbroic clay, continued for an unusually long time, probably well into the 5th century. By contrast, in nearby Devon, it becomes harder to pin down exactly when local potteries ceased operation. Archaeologists sift through coin evidence, stray pottery sherds, and imported exotic containers to piece together the puzzle of how long Roman-influenced life lasted in this corner of the island. Below is an extensive, reader-friendly account weaving together the main findings and big-picture context from several decades of research. Many hyper-specialized details, like the names of kilns or references to specific excavation plans, are left out to highlight the bigger story. Prepare to travel back in time and learn about the final bloom of Roman-influenced craftsmanship, the remarkable survival of Cornish Gabbroic potteries, and the glimpses we have into a changing world of trade and cultural identity. In late Roman Britain, some areas boasted luxurious villas, bustling towns, and a complex network of roads. Devon and Cornwall, on Britain's southwestern peninsula, lay off the main highways connecting the populous east. Although the city of Exeter in Devon was a proper civitas capital meaning, it functioned as an administrative centre for the local Romano-British community far west, was widely perceived, at least by early scholars, as an underdeveloped outpost. With more modern excavations, archaeologists have realised that Devon and eastern Cornwall did, in fact, share many normal features of Roman Britain, including villas with tiled roofs, roadside settlements, and a consistent supply of everyday pots from a variety of sources. The difference, however, was scale. Sites were fewer and typically less elaborate than those in wealthy regions closer to London or Cirencester. Interestingly, there was a sub-region around Exeter that exhibited a fairly standard layout: paved roads, farmsteads or villas along main routes, a walled town at Exeter itself, and smaller distribution centres or local hubs. Yet as one travelled farther west across Devon and into Cornwall, large villas became rare. The southwestern coastline near Plymouth, Totnes and Dartington shows scattered evidence of Roman-style building materials like roof tiles or the remains of hypercost heating systems, but overall, the pattern is a diluted Roman presence. You might wonder why potsherds, broken pieces of ceramic vessels, are so important. The short answer is that pottery often survives well in the soil, and styles change in recognizable ways over time. Each region had one or more major production centers, distributing wares to local markets. Sometimes imported fine wares or storage jars from distant lands appear on sites, highlighting trade routes. By charting which styles ended abruptly or lingered on, archaeologists can gauge how societies adapted or fractured when an empire withdrew. Let us start with the star of the southwestern story, Gabbroic pottery from Cornwall. Gabbro is a type of coarse-grained igneous rock, and there is a particular zone on the Lizard Peninsula in Cornwall where the clay inherits that Gabbroic characteristic. Pottery made from this clay has a distinctive look and feel, often with dark inclusions that can be spotted easily, even if you are not a specialist. During the later Roman period, potters in Cornwall continued making Gabbroic vessels that had evolved from earlier local traditions. These might include jars with slightly flanged rims or slack-shouldered cooking pots. Unlike many other British regions where potting industries geared to Roman tastes collapsed by the early 5th century, the Cornish Gabbroic tradition seems to have persisted well beyond the moment most imperial systems vanished. Did you know that in some parts of Cornwall you can find Gabbroic potsherds that could date to the mid-5th century and possibly later? An especially striking case is the site of Bantham in South Devon, where excavation revealed an important deposit dating from around the later 5th century. Within that layer, archaeologists identified Eastern Mediterranean amphora sherds containers once used to transport goods like olive oil or wine mixed with local pottery. Significantly, these local pots included a newly broken Gabbroic Ware jar. Because the Mediterranean imports in that layer can be dated fairly confidently to the mid to late 5th century, it proves that Gabbroic pottery was still being made, used, and traded out of Cornwall and into Devon at least around that time. This is a rare and crucial chronological anchor. Moving to Devon, one widely distributed pottery in the Roman era was South Devon Ware, a local product with easily recognized textures and forms, cooking pots, storage jars, and simpler table vessels. Before about the 3rd century, Devon's communities also used various gritty greywares and other local styles, but by the mid to late Roman period, South Devon ware emerged as a major competitor, even challenging the better-known black burnished ware, BB1, from southeast Dorset. In some rural sites west of Exeter, South Devon ware can outnumber BB1 in the final decades of Roman rule. Archaeologists once suspected that South Devon ware might have lingered on into post-Roman times, yet the Bantham evidence suggests otherwise. At Bantham, no intact South Devon ware turned up in the deposit that contained the 5th century Mediterranean imports. The only piece found was probably a stray, earlier sherd that had washed in or been inadvertently transferred from a nearby Roman enclosure. Because Bantham lies directly in the heartland of South Devon ware, one would expect it to be present if production continued well into the 5th century. Its absence suggests the industry ended likely sometime close to the final decades of the 4th or very early 5th century. During Roman times, a significant portion of Devon's pottery supply came from outside the region, particularly from the famous black burnished ware kilns in southeast Dorset. This robust, dark cooking and serving ware was traded far across Britain. In Exeter and neighbouring areas, archaeologists can track BB1's evolving forms through the 3rd and 4th centuries, some with distinctive lattice decoration or conical flanged bowls. These forms changed over time, giving specialists a good sense of which lines were produced in the final period of Roman occupation. But how long did BB1 keep arriving? That is the tricky part. Excavations in Exeter's city centre show that many occupation levels with late coinage, like those from the second half of the 4th century, still contain standard BB1 forms. However, certain very late types that appear in the core production zone, in modern Dorset, show up in only minimal quantities or not at all in Devon. This mismatch might indicate that southwestern markets were no longer receiving the newest designs, possibly due to a breakdown in the distribution network. Exeter's coin supply peters out after the mid-4th century, except for a handful of stray issues, so sorting out whether or not the town remained heavily inhabited into the 5th century is complicated. Coins can fade from the record for many reasons, but one strong possibility is that the overall connectivity with the rest of Roman Britain dropped away sometime after the 370s or 380s, so the southwestern region saw no further shipments of new pot designs. Devon potters, such as those making South Devon ware, might have carried on for a short while, but evidently not too far into the 5th century. Meanwhile, Cornwall's specialized Gabbroic tradition soldiered on. Up the coast in northern Cornwall lies Tintagel, famous today for its dramatic island castle ruins and Arthurian legends. Excavations there show evidence of activity spanning Roman and post-Roman intervals. researchers have found small amounts of Roman-era wares, some Oxfordshire colour-coated bowls, imitations of red slip Samian shapes, and a few scattered older forms mixed with quantities of post-Roman. Imported pottery from the Mediterranean. The local native fabrics at Tintagel include Gabbroic clay vessels, plus at least one other variety containing slate or shale fragments, probably from coastal exposures in North Devon or Cornwall. This second variety somewhat resembles the old Roman-era tradition of slate-tempered ware that had circulated sporadically to sites in North Devon centuries earlier. Curiously, at Tintagel, the number of local post-Roman pots is extremely small compared to the large amounts of imported amphorae and fineware from the Eastern Mediterranean. Possibly, the center of local pottery production or usage lay elsewhere along the coast, or maybe the high-status occupant at Tintagel had a marked preference for exotic shipments over local wares. Alternatively, only a fraction of the site has been explored to any depth, so the known sample might not represent the true ratio of local to imported pottery. As the main Roman administrative center in the southwest, Exeter remains pivotal to our understanding of how late Roman and early post-Roman society functioned. By the final decades of the 4th century, much of the city within the old Roman walls appears to have become sparsely occupied, with only a small cluster of dwellings around the Forum or in selected blocks. A few large, imposing buildings were torn down, their foundations picked over, and the stone reused. Several mid-5th century burials on the site of the Basilica and Forum strongly suggest that a Christian community, maybe an early church, was established amidst the ruins. Oddly, no newly made 5th century Mediterranean amphora or fineware has turned up in Exeter, despite the presence of such imports at multiple sites along the south coast of Devon, like High Peak, or on the north coast of Cornwall, like Tintagel. This could mean that Exeter effectively dropped out of the region's maritime trade networks. Whatever survived of the Roman town might have been overshadowed by new coastal centers more focused on seaborne commerce. Or perhaps the community continuing in Exeter had little interest in imported wares. We simply do not know. This absence is an intriguing silence in the record. It is worth looking at broader context. After official Roman authority dissolved around the early 5th century, political and economic landscapes across Britain shifted. In many places, local populations either returned to simpler, regionally specific pottery or ceased using pots at all in daily life. Metal or wooden containers, less archaeologically visible, may have replaced ceramics for cooking and storage. Additionally, new communities on the southwestern peninsulas might have turned to direct maritime links with the Atlantic seaboard, focusing on trade routes that connected them with parts of Gaul or the Mediterranean world. By the mid-5th century, we see evidence that some southwestern sites, particularly those along the coasts, were receiving amphora shipments from North Africa or the Eastern Mediterranean. These arrivals typically carried wine, oil, or other commodities. Why did certain southwestern enclaves enjoy such connections while others, Exeter for one, apparently did not? Possibly, this was a result of shifting power centers or the rise of local rulers who had strong ties to overseas trade. Did you know that similar phenomena happened in Western Britain's Celtic regions, such as southwestern Wales, where the presence of imported amphorae often signals local strongholds or nascent tribal kingdoms forging alliances abroad? One might guess that typical Romano-British potteries in Devon either vanished or rapidly declined in the first few decades of the 5th century, bowing to the general economic disruption. But that does not mean everyone in Devon abruptly stopped using pottery. People had older vessels at home, like an Oxfordshire colour-coated bowl inherited or purchased years earlier, that could remain in circulation for a long time. In certain corners, perhaps especially in Cornwall, potters found a stable local demand for robust cooking and storage jars. Gabbroic ware, so specialised and deeply rooted in local tradition, survived these times of turmoil. Its producers, seemingly less reliant on an empire-wide system, might have continued with the same or slightly modified shapes, serving local and occasionally cross-border markets. By the time we reach the mid to late 5th century, a site like Bantham could exhibit the curious mixture of brand new imported Mediterranean amphora fragments alongside a freshly broken Cornish Gabbroic jar. Meanwhile, the bigger industries to the east had likely ceased. That latter detail highlights an important distinction. Not all pottery traditions ended at once. Some, deeply connected to large-scale commerce, like the wide-reaching BB1 from southeast Dorset, could not survive once the broader distribution networks collapsed. Others, meeting local demand, appear to have sputtered on for a generation or two. The story of southwestern Britain nicely underscores how the demise of Roman Britain was not universal or abrupt. Some corners reconfigured themselves, forging new trade links across the sea, while preserving older craftways. Turning back the clock to earlier centuries, archaeologists found that even in the late 1st and 2nd centuries, Cornwall's distinctive Gabbroic clay pots occasionally popped up in Exeter. Presumably brought along trade routes, perhaps legionaries or merchants valued something about the clay's sturdiness or its recognized origin. This small presence in Exeter underscores how southwestern potters had long-standing habits of exchange across short distances. So, the late 5th century occurrence at Bantham may be the continuation of a relationship begun centuries earlier, though by then, the world around them had changed drastically. Tintagel's puzzlingly scant native pottery is one of the region's greatest enigmas, even though other places with late or post-Roman activity yield loads of local cooking pot fragments. Tintagel's excavation has turned up many Eastern Mediterranean amphora shards, but only sporadic bits of Cornish or Devon wares. Why is that? Possibly, the main domestic quarters have not been fully excavated, or else the occupant on the island if it served as a high-status trading hub or monastic center mostly used and recycled imported containers. In that scenario, local coarse pottery might have been relegated to less visible corners of the site. Beyond the southwestern peninsula, potting traditions either ended or radically transformed. The southwestern story is special because it retains an echo of continuity, those Cornish kilns that kept firing in the 5th century, yet it also fits the broader pattern of fragmentation in post-Roman Britain. As the old supply lines frayed, communities found new ways to survive. Some turned wholeheartedly to maritime links with the Mediterranean, while others withdrew into more self-sufficient lifestyles. Potters who had once relied on large, far-reaching markets could not compete in a collapsed economy. At the same time, small local traditions that catered to immediate community needs, like the robust Gabbroic Ware, found a niche and continued a proud lineage of craftsmanship. By the time we approached the end of the 5th century, nearly everything about southwestern Britain's settlement had begun to transform religion, governance, trade patterns, social hierarchies, and daily household objects. From the vantage of archaeology, a battered piece of cookware offers surprising insights into these shifts. Although potsherds may be mundane, they effectively chart the final act of Roman influence in Devon and Cornwall, capturing a moment when older ways died out and new connections emerged across the seas. So, next time you wander the rolling fields near Exeter or the cliff edges of Cornwall, picture a place in flux, a world just beyond Rome's final horizon. People still cooked soups, stored grain, and drank local brews from handmade vessels, but the intricate lattice of Roman Britain had unraveled. Into that gap stepped local potters, coastal traders, monastic communities, and foreign merchants bearing amphorae from distant shores. The pottery that remains in the ground is a silent chronicle of that transition, bridging the centuries from the empire's last breath to a new era in the southwestern reaches of Britain. And that's it. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy exploring historical worlds, be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on more exciting stories.